So I just got home from watching Lee Cronin's The Mummy, and I gotta be honest, this movie had me locked in the entire time. No phone checks, no how much time is left, just pure, disgusting, chaotic entertainment. But it's not perfect. What's up, y'all? Welcome to Surfing the Stream. Today I am reviewing Lee Cronin's The Mummy, and if you're wondering whether this movie is going to be worth your time, short answer, I think it is, especially if you like your horror nasty, disgusting, and just a little unhinged. So let's get into it just a little bit. First off, this movie is it's pretty entertaining, and I don't mean that lightly. There are a lot of horror movies out there that like it starts strong, kind of dips in the middle, and then it tries to bring it back home in the end. This held my attention the entire time. Now, it does do this wave action while it paces through the story where it seems like we get something, then we slow down, then we get something, then we slow down. So it does that throughout the course of the entire movie. But the pacing to me is one of its biggest strengths. Even when it does that, it just keeps moving for me. There's always something happening, always something pulling me forward. And I just never found myself looking at my phone and saying, wow, it's only been 30 minutes. How much longer do we have in this movie? No, the only time I looked at my phone was like, okay, can I go pee right now? Like, how much more time do we have left? Can I make it to the end? And that was the only time I ever checked my phone for the runtime. And it was never out of, man, I'm just bored, because this movie is entertaining from beginning to end. The beginning is a little bit slower, and I went into this movie completely blind. I didn't watch a single trailer. I didn't read a synopsis, nothing. All I knew was Lee Cronin was writing and directing it, the guy from Evil Dead Rise, and it was The Mummy. Those are the only two things that I knew about this movie. And I gotta say, I think that worked in its favor a little bit because I went in with no expectations whatsoever. And I really had a great time at the theater just going into this completely blind. Speaking of Evil Dead Rise, if you combined Evil Dead Rise and The Exorcist, that is the movie that you're going to get with Lee Cronin's The Mummy, where it has just that over the top brutality and really gross practical effects, where you kind of think to yourself, okay, like that's kind of insane that they came up with this kind of shit. And there's some cool kills throughout this entire movie. Some that I was like, damn, I can't believe I don't think I've ever seen that in a horror movie ever before. So that's great. A movie that's just really layered in to Lee Cronin's The Mummy is The Exorcist. There are so many Exorcist influences in here. I mean, at the heart of this movie, it is a possession movie. So you got that Exorcist type dread throughout the entire runtime, along with some slower creeping, almost spiritual horror that makes certain scenes feel a little bit heavier than they actually are. And I've already mentioned that this movie is gross. This movie doesn't hold back. It is just genuinely gruesome, disgusting, and at times I was like, oh God, that was kind of fucking disgusting, not gonna lie. So if you're into more of a body horror, possession horror, anything that really makes you squirm, this is gonna be a hit for you. But with all that said, this is not a perfect movie. The biggest issue for me are the characters and the story. Some of the characters just feel like kind of there. Like the dad, like I think they give him more so to do than anyone else. And I think it is the acting there. It seems like he overacts in some of those scenes, but overall the characters just kind of feel there. Like you understand their role in the story, but you're not really connecting with them on a deeper level. And for a movie like this, you really need those emotional beats and those connections to the characters for this movie to hit even harder. On the other side of things, you have the story, which it feels like there's some things missing in this movie. And I'm not saying that in a way of like, well, how do they get over here? They were just over here and there's some things missing. No, I think the pacing is so quick at times. I think they're trying to cover so much ground with making this The Exorcist, The Mummy, and Evil Dead Rise. They're stuffing it so cram full of different influences that it leaves the story behind in certain aspects. Like you'll get to the very end of the movie and you're like, they really sped through some of the stuff for quote unquote the mummy, which is why we're here. So that aspect of the story, not a big fan of. It just left me wanting more. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing because you just didn't give me enough in the 2 hour runtime that you had. Some movies you have that you're like, oh no, like keep giving me more from these characters, more from the story. And this was I just feel like it's missing. And then there's the third act where the CGI really gets relied on way too much. So up until that point, the movie relies more on I say grounded horror, but you know what I mean. As grounded as it can be with The Mummy and The Exorcist and whatnot. And it leans more towards the practical side of things, especially with body horror and the gruesome practical effects, even when all that's to the extreme. But then once the CGI kind of ramps up, it loses a little bit of that raw, gritty edge that made those earlier portions of the story so effective. And it was distracting for that almost that entire third act. It took me out of the movie a little bit and made me think to myself, I really wish they would just never included the CGI here. It's an addition to this movie that I don't think was really needed, especially when you've strayed so far from the Mummy and to the Exorcist territory that I don't feel like it was needed as much as they put it in there. But overall, though, I really enjoyed this. It's one of those horror movies that knows exactly what it wants to be, and they went into this movie thinking, "Hey, we want to do a mummy movie that is completely different from anything else that's been released." And you got to give them credit because that is what we got. We have not had for a very very long time a straight up horror movie for the mummy. It's always been action adventure, and to me this nails the horror side of that franchise. It's intense, it's gross, fast paced at times, and I was legitimately engaged from start to finish, even though the beginning was a little slow to get into things. And yeah, the characters could have been stronger. The story was trimmed down a little too much. And I say that as someone that firmly believes that a horror movie should not be over 2 hours. So in that respect, I think they messed up in the editing department just a little bit. That the fact that you couldn't tell your entire story in 2 hours, I don't know. I needed more from that story, but at the same time, it's like, well, then you should have edited maybe a little bit better to include those elements from the actual mummy character. And I don't want to dive into specifics just yet because I don't want this to be a spoiler review. Maybe next week I will drop a spoiler filled review of The Mummy and tell you what exactly kind of pushed me closer to the edge of this is a really good horror movie versus it being a truly great classic horror movie. But regardless of the issues that I have with the movie, I think the experience as a whole is still a really solid addition to the Mummy franchise. And it's a solid movie going into the summer. It's going to be one of the more memorable movies of 2026 for me. But guys, if you have seen The Mummy, let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you like horror movies, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. And then while you're there, hit that like and subscribe button. And I'll catch you next time on another one. Laters.